Well, so good to meet you officially, even if
Yeah, you
it's
too.
even if it's by video. Um, I appreciate the chance to get to talk with you, Chelsea, again. One of the things that I really love, as a warrior, a combat veteran, I've come to appreciate so much more the positivity that people put out into the world, and it doesn't mean we're without challenges in our life, but that message of positivity is so huge, and for me as a person who believes that Christ is the source of my healing, um, it's it can't be understated how important the work that you're doing is. So I'm so excited to have
Thank
you
you.
today.
Thank you so much. I honestly, I'm just still shocked that you reached out to me. I mean, I don't feel like, you know, I'm just a little somebody from Michigan that grew up on a farm, tiny town, it's refreshing to feel like my videos are being, pushed out to the world and the world sees it. So it's really cool and I really appreciate you reaching out to me about it.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Well, let's get right in. You and I have interacted on social media. I found your page, and it has been an incredible journey of positivity. But I also recognize that you've gone through some trauma, and you talk a little bit about that. But maybe introduce to this global audience today a little bit about who you are and where you come from, and then we'll go back in time a little bit and talk through some experiences.
Okay. Um, My name is Chelsea. I am a 31-year-old wife and dog mom and entrepreneur as of literally a year ago today. Um, I quit my job as an accountant and I decided to pursue being a virtual assistant and working with small businesses and helping them work through things that they need to get done. And I'm a photographer. I've been a photographer since 2011. I also do content creation, and that's more of a hobby, honestly. It's just kind of a word vomit diary thing for me. I grew up in a very small town, I think of like 2,000 people, and I was homeschooled until ninth grade. My dad homeschooled me and my brother. And then after that, I went to a Christian private school and I graduated there. And I graduated with 9 people. So it was very, very tiny, very, very small town. Everything was very small town. And I've been with my husband since 2013. We met through his cousin. And I actually had a boyfriend at the time when I met him, which I don't condone this now. Looking back on it, it's like, that's terrible. Everything happens for a reason, and God made me reach, like, talk to him. And I moved in with him 2 months after we started dating, and it's almost been 12 years.
Wow.
He was my 12-year rebound. I have gone through a lot of stuff in my life, even though I'm only 31. I went through a lot of trauma when I was from the ages of 17 to 19. And I fully believe that going through those things has really formed who I am today. And I wouldn't be where I am without that. Yeah, that's essentially who I am in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's wonderful. One of the things I like that you've said is, can you turn down the volume on your screen a little bit? It's kicking an echo back.
Yeah, is that better?
Yeah, yeah, much better. One of the things I like that you said was that, despite having a boyfriend, you found who you're really supposed to be with, your soulmate, so to speak, right? Um, and
Mm-hmm.
my daughter, she's serving a mission for our church in East Africa right now. And she asked
That's
me a
awesome.
question about 40 minutes ago. She said, "Dad, does it matter who we marry?" or is anyone who's just a good person good enough? And I said, no, I think it matters who we marry, because compatibility, especially when things get hard, it's important to look at that person who's aging and
Mm.
changing and all these things, and still look at them and say, yeah, I choose you over everything else. And um, I don't know that we would do that with just anybody, you know?
No, no, I don't. I definitely would not. Just looking at my husband, and I get such a wave of, oh my God, you are my person. I get that feeling in every sense of the word. And it's so comforting to feel that he accepts me for everything that I am. And he has helped me heal so much that any other person that I have come in contact would have just left. Like, girl, you a mess. I gotta leave. Like, I can't be around you.
Mm-hmm.
Compatibility is everything. And even though I am still the same person I was back 12 years ago when we met, I wasn't compatible with the guys that I was with compared to the way that I am with my husband. And it's so wild to think that I'm still that person. And I thought I was compatible with those guys. And then looking back at it now, it's like we were so oil and water, like so completely not the same. So it's very, yeah, it's interesting to think about. You think you're compatible with somebody, but in reality, you're really not. Looking back, hindsight's 2020, right?
Yeah, big time. And this is something that's always on my mind as I have older girls and kids growing up. I really want to help them to understand that infatuation isn't going to be a sustainable love later.
Correct. Correct. Correct.
Yeah. Well, Chelsea, walk us back in time a little bit and only share what you feel comfortable with sharing. But I would love to hear the darkness that you went through, and then where it's brought you and how it's brought you to where you are now in the light more.
So I'm not going to name names. I don't want to do that. I'll be brief in very, very personal things. When I was, how old was I? I was 16. Okay, so 16 and 19 was when this all happened. I dated this guy, and looking back on, and I did this probably 5 or 6 years ago. I have him blocked on everything because he doesn't need to see my life. I don't need to be in his life. I don't believe in that. I truly don't. I unblocked him to read our messages between each other because I wanted to see the way that I wanted to see my growth. And if this is a toxic thing, then so be it. But I was interested in to see how I interacted with this guy, because a lot of times, and I'm sure you know, like your brain turns off pieces of your past to protect you. And I don't remember half of it because my brain was trying to protect me. So reading these messages back was eye-opening because it was a very, very unhealthy relationship. And I did not think it was unhealthy at the time because I was so in love with this guy. I was so infatuated. I was so in love. I thought he was the guy I was going to marry. You know, he was the one. And looking back at it now, my parents gave me not pep talks, but like they'd make comments about it, like certain things that he'd say my dad would say, well, I didn't really like what he said in that situation. And my mom would say, well, that's a little strange that, he acted that way, and I brushed him off. I'm a 16-year-old girl. Why would my parents know anything? The older I get, my parents get smarter. It's wild. I had such a verbally, mentally, and emotionally abusive relationship with this boy, that I was so blindsided by the fact that my fire was being put out at such a rapid rate that I truly did not know who I was as a human being. I lost who Chelsea was. I was so enamored with him. I think I was enamored with the idea of him. I wasn't enamored in, I don't know. It was such a weird thing reading back on those messages. So I was with him for 2 years and some change. And I got to the point where I initially said, I don't feel like this is right. I truly don't remember this breakup. I remember breaking up with him. He went to college really, really far away from me. And I broke up with him over the phone. And then he, did the typical call you 55 times in 10 minutes kind of thing. And we broke up in March. And then my grandfather passed away in June of that year. And I was very, very close with my grandfather. And he showed up to his funeral. And I remember my grandfather did not like him. And when I broke up with him, he said, thank God, because he's not who you're supposed to marry, Chelsea. And when your grandparents say things like that, that's when it's like, oh, okay, like, all right. And I remember just looking at him and my mom, and he was standing in the back part of the room, and my mom said, he's here. And I said, who's here? And she said, he's here. And I turn around and I'm like, are you serious? And it was just, I felt like I could never get away from him. And he was never physically abusive. It was just verbal, mental, emotional, which is still enough. That's a lot. And finally, I got to the point where I said, I need you to leave me alone because I cannot heal from this, and we are not going to be together. And that was it. And I hadn't heard from him. Then I started dating this other guy who was a Marine, and he had a lot of PTSD and a lot of trauma, and I understand that. I was 18. He was 6 years older than me. And thinking about that now, I'm like, girl, that's 18 and 6 years older. That's a lot. And a lot of stuff happened with him. I was with him for 10 months. Also emotionally, verbally, all of that, everything. And he made me feel crazy. I legitimately felt like a crazy person. I felt like my nervous system couldn't calm down. I felt so uneasy with everything. And
was that because he was that way with PTSD, anxiety, fight or flight being broken, and he was always up?
Always.
Yeah.
There was no peace. There was no calm. It was all the time. It was just, and I wanted that peace. I wanted to feel at ease, and he didn't give me that. And while I was dating him, found out that his ex-wife was pregnant, found out that it was his child at 19 while I was dating him. And that was wild. Thinking about these things now, I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. It's just wild. And then I remember one night I was working at a gym and I was the personal trainer there, and I had to be there at 5 a.m. And I woke up at 4 or 3:30 or 4. And I look outside. For some reason, I had a thought in my head, like, look outside. He was gone, my truck was gone, and my wallet was gone.
Ooh.
And he went to a restaurant and got breakfast burritos and spent like $40 on breakfast burritos with my money in my truck, and I was late to work. Like, just, where's the logic? I don't know. It was wild. And I don't know if he was cheating on me, but I kind of had that thought. And during that time that I was with him, when I was working at that gym, I had met his cousin, my husband's cousin, years prior, but I saw him again at the gym, and he had lost a ton of weight. And we got to talking, and he was like, hey, I got a cousin who's single. And I'm like, well, I have a boyfriend, I don't need any of that. I'm good. And that was in January of 2013. And in April, so I was still dating this guy. And I had posted on Facebook, like, hey, I'm going to go watch my brother play baseball. Does anybody want to go? And my husband's cousin said, yeah, I'll go, but I'm bringing Zach. And I'm like, oh my God, that's terrifying. And I made an absolute fool of myself. I get nervous when I laugh. When I get nervous, I laugh like really hard, uncontrollably, cannot stop. And he made me laugh like that. And we went out for pizza after the fact, and I had pizza come up my nose. I was laughing so hard. Like, it was just mortifying. First time ever meeting this man, and I made a fool of myself. So 3 days later, I felt in my gut feeling was saying, break up with this guy, because you are in front of the man you're going to marry. I had this thought, and I said, God, is this really what I need to do? Because this is crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm just not realizing that I completely forgot something way before I even dated the first guy. So let me finish the story, and I'll go back years. So I ended up breaking up with him and then texting my husband. Well, nobody at the time, and I said, I need you to help me move out of his house, which is crazy. Him and his cousin brought their trucks to his house and helped me move everything out of it. And I moved in with my buddy. And then 2 months later, I moved in with Zach, with his mom and dad. And we lived with his parents for 4 years. And then we bought a house. Yeah, so that's how that hot mess started. But let me jump back before I started dating this first guy. Well, actually, during the time that I started dating this guy when I was 16. So I went to this Christian private school, and everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows everybody's business. And I'm so sorry if you hear my dog.
That's the famous dog I've heard on your Instagram.
So I went to the small school, and I was assaulted by somebody that I knew. And the guy that I was dating, the first guy when I was 17, he didn't believe me. And that broke my heart. And essentially, what happened after the fact, I had called my dad. My dad was the first person I called. And I told him what happened. And he was at work. And I heard my dad fall over. And I said, "Dad, are you okay?" And he said, "No." And so we ended up going to the hospital. I had the kit done, and they said, yes, that's, it's all over. And I pressed charges, whole 9 yards. And when my attorney called me to tell me, and this was like a month or two later, saying that I wouldn't win because I went to his house. And this is the first time I'm ever speaking about this out loud on the internet. That was a really weird feeling that essentially they wouldn't believe you because, what you're wearing. I was wearing a t-shirt and jeans. It doesn't matter. I could have been wearing a snowsuit. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
So that happened. And then the guy that I was so madly in love with, his family didn't believe me. And that was in October of 2010. And I started dating this guy in February of that year. And we'd only been together that long. And so I had gone through 2 years of him just not believing me, thinking that I went over there for that. Went over there for a school project. And going through that, and then having the boy that you were so madly in love with not believe you because he thought you were just going around and cheating on him is wild. So that's one part of my trauma.
Chelsea, if I can interrupt for a second, a couple of things go through my mind. One is it's hard for a guy to understand fully what a woman experiences when she's been assaulted. It's not only a betrayal of trust, a violation of confidence. I think it forces you to doubt what your original intentions were or what his were, and the whole thing just becomes confusing. And part of that struggle at that young age, and I try to talk to my kids, is that the brain is still developing for both guys and girls, right? And when trauma happens, it makes it so much like a tornado has hit our memory and our mind. And then adding on top of that the betrayal of people that you trust or love, and they're not believing you. I don't know any woman that would subject herself to a kit at a hospital. No. Who voluntarily was out to be promiscuous. So that's the first thing that kind of hits me and makes me angry. And unfortunately, this message of assault for women is more common than not. I would
It
say a
is.
majority of the women that I've interviewed have experienced the same trauma. And you mentioned it briefly, but it is not your fault. I don't care if you went over on a halter top and a mini skirt. It doesn't give someone else the permission to take advantage. So, I appreciate you being vulnerable to share that, because that message will resonate with people who are watching and have experienced their own assault in that way. And sadly, and my mother was one who experienced that same thing when she was young. And if I can go back in time just for a second and tell you a quick story of my mother, she experienced this assault when she was a child and then as a teenager. Family didn't believe her. And what it did was it flipped a switch in my poor mom's mind that the only way that she could feel love is by allowing men to use her. And my poor mom went through
Mm.
hell from the age of 16 all the way through 22, maybe. Um, and when she finally found a way out, she got out of that situation, and it wasn't a year later that she met my dad. And my dad had come from a physically abusive household. And so here we have two abused people, right? One sexually and mentally, emotionally, one physically and emotionally. And they found each other. And I remember my mom telling me this story, and I loved my mom like you wouldn't believe. Um, she told me a
I
story
can
of when
see
she,
that.
yeah, when she met my dad, and she had the talk with him, and she's like, I need you to know who I am and what I've done. And she would get emotional when she'd tell this, because she would say, your dad just looked at me and said, that's not who you are, and we'll make a different life together. And they did. And they did. And they raised myself, my brother, my sister in a way that we understood the value of respecting humanity and people. It played a big role in how I was in combat with the civilian population. I had empathy instead of hatred. And so the people that I've known who've undergone this type of abuse, it unfortunately steals confidence at an early age. Um, and maybe my mom, she died at 58, but
Oh,
and it was fine. But she never truly felt clean, if that makes sense. And I remember telling my mom that there was nobody who deserved greater blessings and happiness in this life and the next than her. And and I truly believe that she finally has found that peace. Um, and so for you to tell me these things and share this, Chelsea, I sure appreciate it, and it makes me respect you so much. Um, Talk to me about how you've been able to find healing after these events.
um, let me tell you one more thing
Yeah.
so it makes more sense. After my husband and I started dating, we went through the first year of our dating. I think normal people would throw in the towel because they'd be like, this girl. He had the most patience with me. I think he saw potential in me because we were at 4 months together. And the first guy that didn't believe me, okay, he had, my heart is racing right now. uh, Picture on the internet on a revenge porn website in the Netherlands. I was 16, in love. There were 9 photographs. And a stranger on the internet reached out to me saying that these were on the internet. Going through what I did and then reopening an entire new door of just utter embarrassment and I can't even describe the hurt I felt. I felt so many things, and my husband has helped me heal in ways that nobody has ever helped me do. I have healed because I put in the work with God, in the fact that I prayed every single day, God, please help me. Because growing up in a small town and then realizing that your body is exposed on the internet in ways that that person didn't ask for permission to put that on the internet. Mm-hmm. No United States law works in the Netherlands. So no matter how much my lawyer said, hey, you need to take these down, it didn't matter because our laws don't hang out together. So he finally said, tell them that you were 15 years old when these were taken. In 1 hour, they were gone. And he did 30 days of jail time, which, what is 30 days? And he had a couple other things that he had to do, which kind of ruined his life. And I thank God that had to happen in order for me to heal, so I can tell other people, no matter how much a boy loves you, please don't send pictures. I don't care how much a boy loves you. I don't. Unless that man is your husband and someone you've been with for a very long time. And even still, guard yourself. It took me 6 years to give my husband anything like that, because of the trauma that I felt and the trauma that I went through. And I gave him those photographs on our 1 year wedding anniversary, and he cried. Because he made me feel so safe and protected, and I knew he would never hurt my heart like that. I also did a lot of work talking to God before I married him. Please make sure that this is the man that I'm supposed to marry. I also believe that that my grandfather sent my husband to marry me. Because I started dating my husband almost a year to the day of my grandfather passing away. And I believe that God, this is just my thought, but I think this is true. Makes me feel better. I think my grandfather had to get up to heaven, and God said, Al, his name is Alan, Chelsea's having a rough time down there. Who do you think we should send? And I think my grandfather said, this one, and points at Zach. And God said, I think so too, but I wanted you to have the pick of the crop. He was a farmer. And I fully believe that he picked my husband for me to help me heal from these things. With my husband and me putting in the work and praying about it so much, and now speaking it out loud. It's so healing. And after you had reached out to me, I walked out to tell Zach because I was so excited. And he looked at me, and I didn't say anything. Like, I was in between sentences, and he said, are you sure? And I said, yeah, it's time to talk about it. And he said, I'm so proud of you. He said, you have such a big voice on the internet, even though I have quite a few followers on like TikTok and everything, and I'm not looking for followers. I'm just looking for people to relate. I want people to feel that they are not alone, and using the internet as my space to word vomit those things and to spread that has been incredibly healing. And the fact that I have people reach out to me on the daily telling me stories like this.
Yeah.
Which breaks my heart. But then I tell them that. Not everything in super detail, but enough. And a lot of people have said, I would have never known. And I said, well, that's because I've healed a lot of it. And I'm not, and this is going to sound bad, but like using it as a victim mentality. I'm not sitting here constantly thinking about it and constantly talking about it, but I know it happened. And I think God truly pushed me to become more confident in myself and confident in my relationship with my husband and confident in my relationship with everybody, and knowing you can get through it and you can heal, and you don't have to sit here and wallow in your sadness. Sit in it for a minute, but don't sit in it too long. I also became sober. So 2 years ago, I became sober. That's also been incredibly healing, because I didn't realize how much alcohol truly altered my brain. And I had so many night terrors and so many moments where I felt those emotions coming back, and me thinking about the trauma that I've gone through. And I'd wake up in the middle of the night screaming because I'd have dreams of my body on the internet. And Zach would just hold me. He said, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay. Let's talk about it. It's okay, breathe. Like God knew what he was doing when he sent him.
I love this story. Not the trauma, obviously.
Yeah.
But I love what happens when people turn to God after trauma, find connections that are meaningful. I believe your story of a guardian angel grandfather who reaches down and gives assistance. It's hard for me to believe in a God who just leaves us to always have trauma and suffer without
I agree.
providing a rescue on the other side. Um, and people are frustrated sometimes with God. Say, why do bad things happen to good people? And the reality is that the world we live in and the testing we undergo in this life is for us to learn through our own hard experiences how to trust God and then how to help other people. And you starting a podcast, you doing this Instagram channel where you're talking through your challenges and talking through the hope that exists. Um, it's an inspired call to help people because trauma is the language of the world, whether we want it or not.
It is.
And my channel originally was dedicated to just veterans, and then it became first responders, and then it became anyone who's undergone trauma and is finding a place of light. And Chelsea, I'm so glad. I'm so glad to see your positive messages and the hope in your eyes that comes from what's to be. And the more you tell your story, the more you help people relate to you. You're becoming a rescuer, and I don't know if there's a better way to heal than to do that. Um, I've gone through my own mess, and I'd say I'm still on this journey of progressing up. There's no destination yet. I'm just still moving up the ladder.
Nope.
And every time I hear a story,
Same.
including yours, Chelsea, which I treat so sacred, it's so special. Um, it gives me hope that those other areas of my life where I continue to struggle, and I know many people on this channel who are listening and watching know that struggle is real, but also can see that there's hope and there's help. We really are never alone, even though we feel it sometimes, right? Like you and I, Chelsea, have never met each other in person. We've never communicated past starting on Instagram recently in the last couple of weeks, um, and yet we relate, right? There's a
Hmm.
commonality, a bond, and that's what
Yep.
happens, and that's what's possible when we talk about making and keeping connections. Is there are so many people that can understand who we are and where we are in our process, and we are never really alone.
No, not at all. Not at all. Yeah, it's so healing and so unbelievably comforting that there are people that can relate. It's sad, but it's so nice knowing that this isn't just, granted, my story is my story, but people can say this has happened to me as well.
Hmm.
And it's so eye-opening in a sad way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I really started talking on TikTok and Instagram about the love I have for my husband, and it turned into this, which is so interesting how content can move and ebb and flow that way, and how you started it for veterans and now it's turned into this whole entire other thing. You understand what I mean?
Yep.
It's pretty fascinating. But talking about mental health and healthy relationships and just being a good person and being a positive human being has been so calming to me as well. I actually have a lot of people that tell me that I should narrate audiobooks or meditation things, and I find that very
Why
funny.
not?
I know. I actually looked into narrating an audiobook last week, and it's a lot. You have to audition for it and everything. It's I don't know. It's opening a lot more doors than I expected it to. And I pray about it every single day. Like, God, please, what's going to happen today? And actually, the day that you reached out to me was the day that I had prayed a couple times. Something else has to happen. God, I need something else, another opportunity to happen. And then 10 minutes later, you messaged me. I'm like, okay,
Amazing.
I see you. I see you, God.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about your plans for this podcast. I'd love for you to plug your future endeavors here.
Okay. So I named it Hanging with Hayes. And I want it to be, I've done 5 or 6 episodes. I batched them so I can release them every other week, probably for now. I don't want to get overwhelmed with myself because I have so much on my plate now. But I have an episode where I'm talking to my husband and his coworker about their jobs and the struggles that they face as, construction workers and just blue collar life in general. I fell into that niche on accident.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have a couple where I'm talking about questions that people ask me about relationships and things like that. But I really want it to be based on mental health and relationships and trauma. I do have a girl that I want to have on that she was also assaulted. So I want it to be kind of a space where people can just talk and have a conversation, just like what you're doing, really. So that's really what it's going to be. It's kind of be like a plethora of things, but I want it to be kind of a combination salad of things.
Well, good. That is so needed. And I don't think we can have too many people who are inviting people to share their stories and do this work, because that I will never run out of people to talk to on the internet.
No.
Especially since my channel is a global channel, I hope to have more international in the future share their stories. I would love to reconnect with people I deployed to in Africa and have them share their stories.
That would be amazing.
So, yeah.
That would be amazing. Have you had many international conversations yet?
I've had some. I've had some with some Ukrainian and Russian soldiers. I've had a lot of Canadian and some UK. But there's so many stories in the U.S. and so I've had some of those on there, but now it's really just me waiting to see who comes into my view next, and talking with them and inviting them to share their story, because there's so much power in a story. Chelsea, as we get to the end of this interview here, the last couple of minutes, I want it to be your time to give some advice to my global audience who pays attention today. And the time is yours.
All right. If you have healing that you need to do, I really suggest taking a walk every day. 20 minutes, 10, 15, 20 minutes. Do something to be in nature and talk to God if that's what you want to do. Put your headphones on, listen to a podcast about something that's motivational, or sit in silence. You could do that too. Silence is very healing. I really think moving your body has also changed my life too, because I lost 75 pounds. Just being present with yourself is one of the most healing things ever. As a little nugget of advice. And I had somebody tell me one time on one of my comments on one of my TikTok videos, because they say that I romanticize my life. And I never thought about it like that, but I do. They said, you genuinely don't stand in the rain, you feel the rain. And that really opened up my mind, because I I do it I just feel every day. Every single day feels good to me, no matter how much I'm sad or anything like that. I don't take any day for granted, even if it's just a mediocre day. I feel every bit of it because I'll wake up and say, "Thank you, God, for waking me up today.
Mm.
What am I going to do today? How am I going to move my body today? How am I going to motivate myself? How am I going to give my body nutrition? How will I serve my husband today? How will I serve myself?" And I never realized how much I truly did romanticize my life until someone said that. And it was a complete stranger. He'd never talked to me a day in his life.
Yeah.
And I messaged him and I told him, I said, "Thank you for saying that because that is so true." But I didn't realize it about myself until you put that into words.
Yeah, great, great advice. I want to see if I have a picture. I may have moved it. Um, my mother was given a picture about 3 years before she passed, and the picture has a group of people standing with an umbrella, and they're all under this umbrella, and then it has one person out on their own, just going like this, feeling the rain coming down, and I just had that imagery from what you just said, and that was my mom, and I love that. I love that. Chelsea, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your story and sharing the hope that comes after trauma. I love the work that you're doing, and you're going to have days where you're going to be like, why am I even doing this? What is this for? When those voices come, those negative self-talk voices, just push them off and keep moving forward because you're doing some great work. And obviously, you've impacted me.
Thank you.
So keep up the good work, Chelsea.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.